Hello everyone, this is Anshika Malik, and on behalf of the GEOSTRATA, I welcome you all to this engaging discussion on air quality in decline, consequences and solutions for change. The panel discussion will navigate the multifaceted causes, consequences, and impacts of air quality index. We are delighted to welcome Dr. Rafiuddin Mohammed, Program Associate with the Clean Air Team at Council on Energy, Environment and Water. We are pleased to have Dr. Ashish Sharma, Program Manager at World Resources Institute India and founding CEO of Sustainability Alternatives UK. We also welcome Mr. Shubham Thakur, a sustainability and climate change policy analyst. I look forward to this deliberation considering the urgency of the situation. To start things off, I would like to invite each of you to share your perspective on the current state of air quality. What do you think are the biggest challenges and the opportunities you see for meaningful action? Your opening remarks will help us to understand various expert specific knowledge, and we will dive into a broader discussion afterwards. So, Dr. Rafiuddin, could you start by sharing your insights?
Thank you, GeoStrata team, for having me here, and a very good evening to the fellow panelists. I'm Rafiuddin. I'm Program Associate with the Clean Air team. I lead data analytics and modeling within the Clean Air team, and I also get the opportunity to work with the Climate Resilience team at the Council. Um, and I would say that every winter we talk about AQI, whereas air pollution, as we all know, is a year-round problem. And it's not that we are breathing a very clean and healthy air rest of the time. We have summer pollution problems in Delhi and the other countries across the Indo-Gangetic Plains also. Therefore, it is very important to keep the conversation going, not just in winter, but also across the year, so that the action against air pollution becomes a year-round thing and not just a seasonal thing. So with this, I'd like to open the discussion and ask my fellow panelists to jump into. Thank you.
That is much needed. I'll open the floor for Mr. Shubham Thakur now. Please go ahead.
So I work as a sustainability and climate policy analyst, as you mentioned, and my work involves creating content on climate change. Basically, I inform and educate people about air pollution, the reasons, causes, and effects, how it is in fact killing us already. And there was a study that by Guardian recently, which revealed that air pollution and climate change is killing people in Europe more than even murders. Back in India, in Delhi, every year we break all the record of being the world's most polluted city. Now, we need some robust mechanism, some policies, because the feeling I get now is that it will come for a few weeks during the winter and everybody will forget. I think we have to move beyond that because it can't just be an affair. Why? Because it's killing us. Now, it's no longer just harming us, it's actually killing us on ground zero. So looking forward to interacting, learning, and sharing my insights with the co-panelists.
Looking forward to more deliberation and more insights from you, sir. Let's gather a few insights from Dr. Ashish Sharma now.
Yeah, hi. Firstly, thanks for inviting me, and congratulations to you for doing such a nice, good job of sort of creating a positive social impact. And I appreciate that you invited. So actually, every year we have same sort of discussions, and I think air pollution is not a new issue in India. It's good that in a way that we are at least talking about it for last at least 5 to 6 years on almost every media sort of platform you open. But air pollution is no more a silent killer. It's a killer which we can see in front of our eyes. Millions of deaths occur globally, and the Southeast Asian region, including India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, remains a most vulnerable, countries. And the most vulnerable are the young children, senior citizens, and the people with existing, respiratory diseases. And my research, I did PhD from University of Surrey, and the focus was on young children. And it's very surprising to see, that UK spend almost 12% of their GDP. I mean, the figures could be here and there. 12% of their GDP on the air pollution health impact related, research projects. While on the other hand, we sort of spend some $2.5 per capita annually in India. So, I mean, this is sort of such a sort of, I mean, it's not very sustainable in the long run. It's good that we aspire to be the third largest economy in the world. It's all good. But then, I mean, we should not forget that India, as emerges as, one of the top democracies and powerful economies, we have to be more responsible to our citizens and people. We cannot just push such topics of, pressing importance and concerns under the carpet. So there's no doubt, young children, they're, suffering from COPD, cardiovascular diseases, respiratory diseases, and it's worsening the asthma, it's affecting their academic learning outcomes. So it's very high time that we don't look for quick fixes, but we look for a long-term, systematic, regional sort of coordinated approach. If not, at least the whole Southeast Asia region, I would support that, at least Pakistan, Bangladesh, and all these countries work together at least, because pollution knows no borders, pollution knows no boundaries. At least if we are not able to bring together these countries in Southeast Asia, at least at the states level, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, and all these, Delhi and all these states should work together. So I think that sort of sets the context with all these remarks, and we can now push forward towards the next sort of, deliberations.
Definitely, sir. You're right about collaborations and a futuristic approach. So now we will proceed to the Q&A session. I'll start with a very crucial question for Dr. Mohammad Rafiuddin. Sir, smog has been a word that is widely used during this season in northern India. And you've seen that pollution dispersion is influenced by a lot of factors. It can be wind, it can be temperature, or it can be atmospheric conditions like fog. And I went through your research and you're focused on satellite detection of fog and low clouds. So, how do you think that satellite imagery and monitoring can be used while we understand the relation between fog and air pollutants? And how can we mitigate this whole concept of smog?
Right. So fog is not something that's new to North India. The topography, the climate of this region is favorable for fog formation in winter. But when fog is combined with air pollution, smoke, it becomes smog. And this cocktail is deadlier because fog is something that can trap this pollution for a very long time. For example, fog prevents your sun's radiation from reaching the ground, which means if your sun's radiation is not reaching the ground, then your mixing layer height, which is the height to which the pollutants mix up in the atmosphere, gets reduced, which means you're facing a condition wherein you have a lot of pollutant concentration near the ground for an elevated amount of time. Right? And during fog, you also see that the wind speeds come down below 2 meters per second. And if you do not have enough wind speed, you won't have dispersion of pollutants, once again prolonging the episode. For example, what happened between November 13th and 20th this year is that we had multiple fog episodes in North India. And we also had stubble burning in the upwind states of Punjab and Haryana. And pollutants from there, along with fog, we blanketed the entire Indo-Gangetic Plain region, and we saw several severe days in Delhi. Now, satellites, we have geostationary satellites, which can image the country they image at different frequencies. For example, European satellites can look at the country every 15 minutes. You have Japanese satellites looking at a frequency of 15 minutes. Then you have India's own satellites looking at 30-minute interval. So we have enough coverage to detect fog formation, but fog detection through satellite and then taking some measures, you do not have enough time between that. So if you have to put in certain measures, you have to do it much before you detect something in a satellite imagery, right? So you'll have to rely on forecast. For example, you have the air quality forecasting system, which gives you forecast several days in advance. You could choose to act on it, provided you've done sufficient analysis to say that the forecasts are reliable to at least some extent, right? And then plan certain measures. And generally, what we see is there are certain days in a year where pollution levels are always elevated. Like, for instance, we did analysis at CEEW, and looking at the data of over 6 years, we know that there are certain days in November and certain days at the end of December where the pollutant concentrations are above the severe mark consistently. So, keeping this evidence in taking this evidence into account, you could plan certain preemptive measures without actually having to rely on even short-term focus. There's no point, like the other panelists said, reacting to high air pollution episodes. It's always better to have some sort of preemptive management measures in place. So, yeah.
So that was really insightful, and I agree that we need a lot of advanced monitoring and preemptive measures. I'll now proceed to Dr. Ashish Sharma. So, being a Delhiite, I've witnessed that there has been a lot of emphasis on a few short-term measures, but there has always been a sense of confusion and a question like whether these measures are universal or Delhi specific. And that brings me to this question that how do you categorize and prioritize air pollution mitigation strategies versus short term and long term? For example, the GRAP 4 stage was implemented in Delhi. Do you think that that is considered as a short term measure? So, what can be the long term measures? And why do you think that regional approach is more effective than city or maybe state specific solutions? So, if you could just shed some light on it.
Yeah, I think all these are very relevant issues, as the fellow panelist, Dr. Rafiuddin illustrated. It's very important that we don't do anything out of the panic or fight or flight mode. We have to really understand the science behind it. I mean, I will start simple and then go into a little bit of details to make it simple for everyone to understand, our audiences also. See, I mean, we say, people say generally, when that, just plant trees. And how do you plant trees? How do you have these greening initiatives? So there's science behind everything. So we should respect the science behind everything. So, I mean, we are at a stage where we really don't have an option that what to do or what not to do. So that's why, I mean, here now we have to do some preventative measures. Sort of, we are trying to address the symptoms, not the root cause. The root cause is the real problem which we want to address, and which of course will take long time. I mean, these we are talking about decades also, and we have to be patient. And even the citizens should also understand we have to be patient. We should not be going to a situation like COVID-19 pandemic, where we were, I mean, N95 face masks were not available. My other part of research I did, hundreds of hours of testing of face masks in that survey, which was published in Journal of Hazardous Materials, and a lot of public, media coverage after that. So the point is that graph 4 is of course helpful, no doubt, no denying to that. And because we also have no other option, and also no other new factories, no other sort of, dirty, polluting old vehicles should be allowed inside the capital. And if now the thing is what to do really in the long term, this is should be our focus also. Now in the short term, okay, graph 4 is good in a way. And also, I appreciate the mandate from the Supreme Court that, okay, why are the delays in the implementation of graph 4? So the sooner is better, the implementation of graph 4. But at the same time, we should understand this can help a little bit only in terms of mitigating the immediate health effects. So one thing we should understand, that when we talk about air pollution, we are talking about mainly about trying to address the visibility part. Because because of the smoke, fog plus smoke, we are having very poor visibility, due to which a lot of accidents happen. And many of us are living in nearby, and originally from Aligarh in UP, and we are almost from nearby areas. And we have traveled also, after midnight also, due to some emergencies at some point in our life. And we could have realized that in winters, your life is totally in the hands of God when you are traveling without visibility, right? And we should understand that all the problems in our country are sort of interlinked with one and the other. What we try to do is try to easy fixes for one problem at a time. We should have a holistic, visionary approach. And the other thing is, let's say if you're talking about climate change. So the thing is, climate change is a long-term issue. All these pollutants, carbon dioxide, and all these pollutants stay in the atmosphere for more than say 100 years or so. Whereas in the air pollution, if we try to address short-lived climate forcing species and target black carbon, there's a smoke, then they stay, let's say, 10 to 20 years in the atmosphere. We can have immediate gains. But I remember in 2014, when I was doing my first master's from South Korea, there was this paper by Schindel et al. I may not be on the top of my mind in keeping up with the literature in climate change, because I'm in air pollution. So it said that neither focusing on CO2 could be the best strategy, neither focusing only on particulate matter could be the best strategy. We have to adopt a strategy where we are having greenhouse gases mitigation and also short-term climate forcing species, where we also address the black carbon. Now, NCAP, sort of this thing, policy, which is good in a way, but then it is only talking about particulate matter and all. So we need a holistic policy where we talk about different pollutants, where we have timelines and deliverables, and we make it measurable also, what actually we have done, what are the improvements. And the last thing is air pollution is going to stay here. I mean, this is unfortunately the harsh reality, but we should be, if we don't take any action, then even 30 years down the line, we'll be having same panel discussion and not heading anywhere. And also, just to add very quickly that, Los Angeles, in California and London were almost in similar sort of a state of affairs in 1950s or 60s. So it's never too late. And unless, if we can plan ahead, even from now, it's not too late.
Definitely, sir, and that was very informative. And also, especially when you referred to that rather than flight and fight, it's important to know the science behind it and to actually have a detailed approach. On this note, let me give the floor to Mr. Shubham Thakur. Sir, carbon markets are something that I derived from your expertise, and the relation of AQI and the carbon market is not something that people actually talk about. So it has not been a very detailed topic. So that is why I have this question for you, that these carbon markets are something that encourage energy efficient production while they also try to minimize emissions. So how do you think that we can link this development of carbon markets and facilitate the growth of sustainable industries? And what do you actually think? How do these industries can contribute to reducing AQI levels? So if you could just stress on that.
Thanks for the question. So carbon market is basically about cutting down or helping reduce your carbon emission and GHG emission across the world. Since we are in our initial stages of developing a full-fledged compliance carbon market under that ETS system. Now I'll share 2-3 examples and how we can actually use carbon market to reduce AQI or air pollution levels drastically. So from 1980 to 2003, United States introduced ETS system, and that helped them in reducing the particulate matter, means air pollution, by 40%. And this was indirect result of carbon market, right? Again, in China, we all remember that I think a few years ago, we all used to see the news, China is the world's worst polluted city and all that. Even now it is, but it's not to the level that we have it here in India. What did China do? Studies suggest China brought in carbon market and ETS system, emissions trading scheme or system, and that helped them again reducing particulate matter, major cause of air pollution in their cities, by 4.6%, around 4.6%, right, in just 4 to 5 years. What they did is they introduced the concept of MRV monitoring, verification, reporting at hotspots, identifying hotspots, and regularly monitoring them. Now, these two were indirect results of carbon market mechanism and system on the impact of air pollution reduction. Now, let me give you an example of direct result. In Gujarat, in 2019, the government, the Central State Pollution Control Board brought in world's first carbon market in the context of particulate matter, right? Carbon market for particulate matter, meaning that they focused on regulating and reducing the particulate matter in the air to reduce air pollution, because Gujarat, we all know, is a highly industrialized state. It has many petrochemical companies and industrial sectors. By 24%, they were able to bring down air pollution with just a margin of 8%. Now, this proves that if you have a systematic carbon market in the context of particulate matter reduction policies, mechanism, and monitoring methods, regular monitoring methods, you can actually bring down air pollution levels. Now, this was not done, in a span of a month or two. It took on an average around 4 to 5 years. Now, in Delhi, I think short-term measures are not working. I could be wrong, but this is what I understand because I've been living in Delhi for the past 9, 10 years. Every day it's the same affair. We break and make new records. So I think we need a systematic and long-term approach to solving this crisis. And since we are going to have a full-fledged carbon market, I think this is the right time to integrate the particulate matter reduction in the policy right now itself, so that we work with a lot of collaboration and synergy with different stakeholders. And then I think we'll be able to achieve what we really want. So that is how your carbon market can play the role in this. For example, what Gujarat did is they introduced the cap and trade policy as mentioned by Ashish sir. So if you emitted particulate matter beyond a certain level, you had to pay a fine. And again, if your emissions had some grave repercussions for climate or climate change or environment, you had to pay a fine. So these are the kinds of mechanisms you need in place. Also, attitude of people, because just policy is not going to do anything, right? Why? Because it's no longer just affecting us, it's actually killing us. I'll give you one very simple example. I was not in Delhi over the weekend. I came here just 2 days ago and I'm suffering from severe cold and cough. And I'm pretty sure it's because of pollution. Because for 2 days I have not used a mask, and this is when it had started. This is a random example. In 2021, can you imagine that out of 34,000 women, pregnant women who were surveyed in Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan, as per Lancet Planetary Health, 77% of the unborn child died, and they were from India. And if you just put together these countries, they were 29%. So this is the deadly effect of climate change. Even unborn children are not saved, let alone people who are on the planet Earth. 80% of your districts are climate disasters prone districts in India. 80%. So I think we need visionary and long-term plans more than short-term plans.
I agree, sir. Like trading in carbon sector is something which seems like a very new year approach. But I think if it is long term, it would be beneficial. And after listening to you, I think I would definitely read more about this domain. Now, I would like to direct the next question to Dr. Mohammad Rafiuddin. Sir, according to the International Energy Agency, energy production and use is the largest source of anthropogenic air pollution in the world. And I think currently there are significant gaps that exist in terms of availability of monitoring stations around major cities like Delhi, for instance. So, what do you think? Considering that monitoring stations are really important because they identify critical hotspots. So, how do you think that the geospatial data can be leveraged so that we can identify priority areas and we can expand our monitoring network so that target based mitigation can be the focus?
Right. Delhi, of all the cities, has actually got a very dense monitoring network, although some may say that no, it's not sufficient for a city of which has a size of over 1,400 square kilometers. But we have around 40 continuous ambient air quality monitoring stations in the city. Whereas if you go to other cities, for instance, if you look at the map of India and you look at the CEEW stations across the cities, right? Some of the cities have one, many cities have none, and some have maybe two or three. So there's a wide disparity of monitoring if you look across the country. Uh, According to an estimate by urbanemissions.info, you would need more than 4,000 continuous ambient air quality monitoring stations across the country to meaningfully monitor. However, you cannot set up CEEW stations everywhere because each CEEW station will cost you about 1.5 crores. So we're talking thousands of crores of rupees. In fact, you would direct the entire NCAP budget towards setting up continuous ambient stations, which is why there have to be some sort of there has to be some sort of an alternative means to monitor sites which do not have these stations. Now, one option is to use low-cost sensors. However, we know that low-cost sensors are not exactly reliable. They have a their performance varies widely depending on the atmospheric conditions and depending on the geography and so on. Therefore, low-cost sensors have to be calibrated very carefully, and the government is trying to bring in the standards for calibration. So once those standards are in place, you will see a proliferation of low-cost sensor networks across cities, which will complement the traditional continuous ambient monitoring stations and give you a better representation of the air pollution variation. Some cities have already started implementing low-cost sensor networks. For instance, Gurgaon is working with some think tanks and academic institutions to operationalize a network. Recently, Google launched its Google AirView Plus. This program aims to have low-cost sensor networks across the country, across multiple cities. And we ourselves are working with Thane Municipal Corporation when we have suggested locations of low-cost sensor installation to them. So they are going to install 25 low-cost sensors, and that data will be operational from December. While these low-cost sensors can be established, there are still remote areas which cannot really be monitored through your manual stations, continuous stations, or low-cost sensors, which is where I believe there is a need to give more credence to satellite derived pollution estimates. Now you have satellite data monitoring a range of pollutants. For instance, you have nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide. You have AOD, which is a proxy for your PM2.5 and PM10. And you have carbon monoxide, which points towards industrial emissions, power plant emissions, and so on. So monitoring these pollutants in remote areas can only be done through geospatial platforms like satellites. And these satellites monitor every single day. So you have you can even if you can't get a real estimate of what the pollution levels are, at least hotspot identification can be done. Post which you could choose to go there, sample, or you could install some sort of a monitor for long-term sampling and measurement and so on. So I would say the kind of acceptance that has been given to, for instance, fire counts by the central government and the state governments of Punjab and Haryana, that kind of recognition has to be extended to other pollutants also.
I agree, sir. Like careful monitoring is very important, and also like all sorts of collaborations between governments as well as non-state actors that would be very, very beneficial for us to mitigate this challenge. And thank you for these thought-provoking ideas. I'll now gather insights from Dr. Ashish Sharma. So we know that air quality deterioration has adverse impacts, but the larger and the most critical impact is on the vulnerable populations. And I went through your research on the impact on vulnerable groups, particularly children, which has garnered significant attention and has been covered by outlets like BBC and HuffPost. So, what do you think? What are the outcomes of your work, and how do you see such research can influence policy as well as public awareness? And considering that this has also been an idea from the UK, and how do you think the UK approaches this idea? And one more idea, if we can add to this, is the startups. How do you think that we can get innovative solutions via startups by mitigating these exposure risks for children?
So yeah, Anshika, a lot of very interesting questions, and I would say each question needs one dedicated panel discussion. But yeah, very interesting to hear. And actually, one thing I want to, what I realized, I have studied in India. 12 years I studied at Ali University. I studied across one continent, one country from a continent, US, Australia, I'm a little bit exposed, South Korea and all. What I realized in the Western countries, though the our education system is fantastic. Now the trend is reversing. The people are coming from abroad to India to really, understand, to get that level of fundamental understanding of concepts and all. But one thing good which I understand in the advanced country is that in whatever research projects they do, citizen science citizen science and community outreach is one essential deliverable which you have to do. So one thing I may say, like while some of our high profile projects, we have a lot of think tanks in Delhi NCR, they are working, but I would add one thing that adding this citizen science outreach, how we engage with the local citizens, how we make a compelling narrative that it is really affecting the most vulnerable people, including, as one of my fellow panelists said, not only young children less than 2 to 3 years or less than 1 year, but also it has prenatal sort of impact as well, unborn babies and all. So See, I mean, one thing I want to say, as I said previously, that London or Los Angeles or maybe even Beijing, I mean, they are at different stages of development than we are. People do make comparisons even with China, but then China, again, we know it. We have been to some of the cities in China, the infrastructure growth, economy, and they are at different stages of development. We can draw some insights, but they may not be necessarily comparable, and we should not always try to fit into that, size. We need tailored, localized solutions. Now, there is greater impact on environmental sustainability, livability, sustainable and smart cities, and how human health is being impacted by all these measures. So their focus is now gone there in all these advanced countries. There is commonality there. While in the developing countries and global South countries, you take in India, you take South Africa, or even South American countries, the focus again still remains on the economic growth. Now, what I believe that we need a combination of both. Like in UK, I mean, they are prioritizing, as I said, at the very outset, that 12% of their GDP they are investing towards the public health. On the other hand, in India, we are a huge population. Firstly, we may not say that we can always blame every time for the government, but in India, one thing we can realize when the IT revolution happened, we need a mass movement. Citizens also have to contribute in a lot of things. For instance, we can at least do some sort of behavioral changes, through community outreach and education. Let's say, I mean, one common example, I may say, for example, people go to gym and they take their SUVs and then they run on the treadmill. These are very, very small things. Why don't we have a long-term visionary approach where we do next generation urban planning with a transit-oriented development, where we have the culture of walk to work, where we really encourage and celebrate if someone uses a bicycle, for example. But sometimes, because in India, we are actually getting there from the lower to the middle class and then to the higher class. So this owning a vehicle and car also becomes more like a social sort of status thing. So I think in India, it's gradually changing. This understanding is coming, but I wish we could have more of the health impact narrative than currently we have. I mean, a lot of meetings I attend, of different think tanks and all. Terry's, World Sustainability Development Summit, WRI India's, Connect Karo program annual, and we keep doing every month. We engage with 20 plus cities under ACAS framework. So I think we need to do more when it comes to the health impacts. And also to really understand they are the most vulnerable, young children, particularly, during their growing stages, their breathing rates are almost double to those of adults. And they are very high functional individuals. So they are exposed to more actually. And the impact on their body is much higher than we can have. So it's not only all these respiratory diseases, but also academic learning outcomes are impacted. It affects their neural, sort of cognitive thinking abilities. So all these impacts are there. There is a realization. Now we have the evidence. We don't have to always reinvent the wheel and to conduct Lancet level of studies when we already know from the global studies. Obviously, I would say we need some more, health impact assessment studies, localized level, because Lancet has certain criteria. It's a very large scale, a very reputed study though, but I wish we had more. Just one more point, which I would like to say in the recent, Lancet study, they have quoted that almost 9.8 lakh deaths in India, 980,000 deaths in India are linked due to unsafe levels of PM2.5 exposure. So this is significant number, almost 10% of our total deaths, and out of which 30 million deaths happen in India. Disability adjusted life years, which is more like a health indicator, which these studies utilize, which is a combination. Deaths is a combination of years of life lost due to mortality plus YLDs, years of life lost due to disability, which is more like healthy life years you have lost. So I think this is a compelling narrative, and I wish in India we do prioritize the health narrative also, and the government also, both at the central and state government, should understand that, and we compulsorily mandate the citizen outreach is also important, and we engage citizens, as also one of the colleagues said about low cost census. We used to do a lot of citizen science activities where even now with WRA we are planning and still doing. We distribute census to the citizens, then we conduct workshops, then we make them feel that you are the scientists, we are the active, we are witnessing you. Then they explain, I kept the sensor in my kitchen, this is the peak, and when I kept it on the front of my window, this is the peak. So I think that makes them more engaged. So last, I would say 3 C's. We co-create, co-design, and co-implement strategies, and in across all the policies, whatever or things we do. I mean, just in a nutshell.
Definitely, sir. I will remember these three C's. And also, that was a really unique take. And I would quote your idea when you said that citizen science and community outreach programs are indispensable. On this note, let me give the floor to Mr. Shubham Thakur, and let us just shift our focus towards businesses and company specific goals. So, my question would be that what role do you think that businesses play in improving air quality if we consider the company specific sustainability goals? And do you think that there are specific industries that go ahead and initiate innovative business strategies and these strategies are sustainable? So, if you could just shed some light on this.
So there is a bit of knowledge gap here when we talk about industries, organizations, and sectors taking proactive actions on reducing air pollution or climate change mitigation strategies. And that is the knowledge gap. Most of them don't know the deadly effects of climate change even now as we speak. This is from my experience. Why do I say this? Because of multiple interactions with industry people and corporate sector organizations. Most of them first want to know how badly climate change is impacting their profitability, right? Because they are going to take action only when it comes to profitability. And this is actually killing economy also. For example, China lost around $34 billion in GDP just in the second quarter of this year. Just one random example. This is a huge amount of money, right? Now, companies have their set of ESG goals, targetings, and all that. But more than that, I think we need to educate and highlight why they need to do this. Only then we'll reach a stage wherein we have to discuss what companies are doing. I know it sounds a bit, weird, but that's the reality. So I think we'll have to first educate, highlight how it impacts their financials, how it impacts the environment, for example, ESG. Most of the companies are now willing to do ESG in their organizations to meet the sustainability goals, which is good. And I won't blame companies. I think we fall behind in terms of knowledge and awareness on climate change front. So I think we'll have to focus more on the awareness part, and then the action will follow.
I definitely agree. And also, I think there is a need for companies to broaden their scope of ESG compliance. And I think that would be a great way forward for us.
Exactly.
I would like to hear Dr. Mohammad Rafiuddin for this next point. The sector of research and innovation has been ever evolving, sir, but despite the growth, we have seen various challenges. So, I have this question that with the rise in research and innovation, specifically in the air quality management sector, there has been a technology of satellite based remote sensing. So, how has this technology enhanced air quality monitoring and evolution? And how do you think that this technology can be leveraged? And if you could just shed some light on the challenges while we cater to the air quality management system.
So I'll probably give you the example of stubble burning. So stubble burning started in Punjab. It's been there in Punjab for decades, but it intensified after the Subsoil Water Preservation Act was passed in 2009. And we started seeing severe air pollution episodes in Delhi and other cities downstream. Especially if you could remember, if you remember the Great Smog of 2016 and 2017, which actually caused deaths in the city, which is when a lot of focus went back towards stubble burning and curbing it alongside other pollution sources. So since stubble burning happens in rural parts of Punjab where there's no way of monitoring and measuring, one of the ways to monitor was to use satellite data. And we relied on satellite derived fire counts, for instance. And satellite derived fire counts have come back in focus now because now there are news reports that say that farmers are actually evading satellites. They become smarter and they know when the satellite passes and they're evading. But irrespective of satellite derived fire counts, there are other proxies which give you information on how much area was burnt in Punjab and Haryana. For example, there are algorithms to compute burnt area. which is computed based on the charcoal signature that's left after the burning happens in the field. And year on year, multiple agencies monitor burnt area and give you an estimate of how much burning happened in the state. There's also satellite derived estimates of carbon monoxide emissions. So whenever stubble is burned, carbon monoxide is released in air, and carbon monoxide being a very interesting pollutant, it doesn't really react for weeks. It has a very slow reaction rate in the atmosphere, so it doesn't disappear. So you can evade the satellite today, but carbon monoxide is there in the atmosphere tomorrow somewhere, and you know if some sort of an increase or decrease of CO has happened, you can correlate with increase or decrease in stubble burning. But there are still challenges. One of the challenges is that you don't have satellites looking at that region continuously. The satellites that I'm talking about are polar satellites, so they pass twice a day, they measure and they leave, right? And geostationary satellites, which continuously look at the country, they do not have the spatial resolution that can resolve, detect extremely small fires or can measure pollutants the way polar satellites do. So there are limitations, and there are plans. For instance, ISRO plans to have a very high resolution geostationary satellite up in the sky sometime, which probably can help us detect fires better than what we do now. There is GEOS satellite in the US, which has a resolution of half a kilometer. So it can detect fires better than, say, the INSAT satellites that we have right now, which are of 4 kilometer resolution. So in the future, when there is advancement in satellite imaging, we'll be able to monitor these pollutants, fires, and whatever, right? Even hotspots better. But there are other ways of other applications of satellite imagery apart from direct monitoring of pollutants. For example, you can monitor land use changes. And land use changes are again associated with polluting activities. For example, when there is a large scale construction activity, you can see that land use has changed. You can measure the built-up index change through satellite imagery. And we did this at CEEW, where when the coastal road project was being constructed in Mumbai, when it was in progress, we noticed we noticed very strong change in the built-up index along the coast, obviously because the road was being constructed. Second thing we also noticed is that the aerosol optical depth, which is a proxy for your PM 2.5, PM 10 concentrations, which is directly measured by satellites. Uh, the AOD values were elevated alongside the coastline, a direct indicator of construction related pollution. So while there are many proxies, many ways of doing things, uh, you have to keep in mind the limitations of these satellite derived estimates, because AOD and PM 2.5 may be correlated, but it's not like, the relationship is not always one to one. So you have to be careful in interpreting. You need skill to interpret, and you need to know in which season you'll have good quality data and which season you'll have bad quality data, and so on.
Truly, sir. And I think that we need technological innovation in the monitoring sector, and then only we'll be able to have futuristic approach and we'll be able to mitigate this issue faster. And moving forward, I'll pose the next question for Dr. Ashish Sharma. So I went through your research area, and it would be crucial for us to at least have a comparative analysis based on your studies in India as well as in the UK. So, based on your extensive involvement in citizen science, both in the UK and India, how effective do you think that public participation is in addressing air quality issues? And also, if you could just tell that where do you think India stands in this regard? Are we on the right track? And how can citizens and multiple stakeholders come ahead and we can collaborate to tackle all of the challenges that you think exist? So, if you could just.
Yeah, I think the as I said before, the community outreach and the three C's are not just the buzzwords, that you co-create, co-design, co-implement the policies, where academic researchers, scientists, engineers, these urban local bodies, commissioners work together and try to establish the short-term and long-term priorities in the context of what are the most pressing environmental sustainability challenges we are facing today, and what could be the way forward. Because sometimes, I mean, you won't believe that, see, I'm an air quality scientist, but I constantly try to push myself outside the comfort zone For instance, yesterday I was in a meeting. It was CII meeting, and it was for the legal people. It was CII ease of doing business. Now I have nothing to do with the legal and all, but it really helped us to push outside the comfort zone. We as environmentalists, mostly, working in environmental related issues, we could be having one side of the story. But when we go out, when we meet diverse people, diverse citizens, the level of engagement, you can imagine. I have a colleague, Yandel. He completed PhD just 2 years after me. He was a carpenter coming from, just MA, some master, like MA in English, basically. Sorry, I take this word just back. So he was Master of Arts in English and doing excellent. And he joined our team, and he was working as in the forestry in the UK. And he joined our team in Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. And then he has very new perspective. Now, how he contributed. He has developed a database of this greening species, which particular greening species are helpful in mitigating certain air pollutants. And greening is really going a big way. We have our colleagues air quality team working across the country, particularly say in Agra and other cities, where the demand is coming from the commissioner's office, that you please suggest us localized greening species in context of India. Of course, in India we have different species, and abroad we have different species. So this sort of research and design, and we need more and more database of such tools, so that we don't again adopt a reactive approach. Sometimes, that, let's say, the commissioner's office in certain cities demand that you suggest these ideas to us. Now just imagine if we have at the central level extensive databases and repositories which are open access. I always want to say that we have to democratize the data. Sometimes people coming from different think tanks, private sector, the challenge sometimes to bringing everyone is that people have sometimes different interests also, different narrative, different background. So for us, it's very imperative to sometimes, to sync on certain important high pressing narratives, and to really work towards common and shared goals with shared responsibility. For instance, compiling the databases of air pollution, what are the level and what are the hottest spots in different cities, sharing those knowledge, and how we can, what are the retrofitting technologies for, older vehicle fleet. While in Delhi, we say that, we are not allowing certain polluting vehicles, which is true, because it's in Delhi and metro cities, the norms are quite stringent in terms of implementation. While we have the laws at the center, but the poor enforcement is there. If you go at the outskirts, at remote places in certain states and cities, you see there's no enforcement. Just like helmet. Not people not wearing helmets. Similarly, pollution under control. Now we have certain, in-house sort of research. We were discussing about PUCs. So, sometimes even our this PUC thing is not very comprehensive in terms of being reflective of what are the most pressing pollutants. It just gives you, smoke. Now, smoke, what is smoke? Now, smoke, this PM is very complex cocktail of emissions, this smoke thing. So we have to be very specific. Which particular pollutant, your vehicle is emitting, how it can be targeted, because, all these emission control devices have, made try to mitigate one problem, one pollutant, but then they may increase other pollutants. So there are sometimes trade-offs in which particular pollutant mitigating device you are using. Say catalytic converter, diesel particulate filter, or you want to target multiple pollutants. And diesel vehicles have, particulate emissions higher than, gasoline vehicles, and similarly higher than even CNG vehicles. So we need a more multi-pollutant approach, centric approach, where we design this based on, again, short-term and long-term goals. Short-term is again the health impact, and the long-term is again, the climate change mitigation and all. Just one more thing I also want to add, because the fellow panelists talked about, ESG. It's very pressing and important topic. See, we are again a developing country where the companies and industries and businesses are and startups are being driven by, this thing, that profitability, your balance sheet, and your benefit, these economic benefits. But it's very important and high time in India that we start this narrative. And even yesterday, and even before that, I was trying to, ask this question to the ministries, that when we can mandate ESGs, because nowadays, few months before, I was at a Terry's roundtable of chief sustainability officers, and this CEO Sheryl Sandberg from CDP, was reporting that, say few hundred companies in top level companies have reported this. I asked a simple question: how many SMEs or MSMEs we are having here? So what we need is sustainability to be integrated at the core of the business models, so that in every process, every operational design, we mitigate not only scope 1 scope 2 emissions, but also scope 3 emissions. Say, let's say I am a think tank, or I am a certain company, I am working on environmental issues, but my vendors, let's say, are using diesel or gasoline in their vehicles, then I'm still creating pollution. And along the similar lines, I mean, as the fellow panelist Shubham also pointed out, in India, we also need to think about multiple strategies, say, carbon credits and all. Surat did a wonderful job and was into the limelight about emissions trading schemes. So this is going on. And why can't we have a very healthy competition amongst the cities? Why only Surat can come out? Why can't some city in UP or Bihar or Uttar Pradesh can come out with similar, champion these causes? Just like we have competition for cleaner city awards, like Surat and Indore competing, we need clean air awards also. We need cleanest industries award also, to really benchmark and to create some sort of lighthouse projects to really pave the way forward. I think this I can say. But in India, we are getting there. Our progress is a little bit slow when it really comes, because some of the so-called, who are little bit sort of, at the edge, competitive edge, we are using, these citizen science approach. But I think every sort of organization should be having this thing. And the traditional CSR approach should be, now many companies are doing that, should be shifted to ESG sort of approach. Now, these are some of the things we also do. I mean, prior to joining WRA, under, at Sustainability Alternatives in UK. And now I'm a little bit more occupied here in engaging with the WRA cities and all. So yeah, I think that's it.
Yes, sir, I agree. And also, I think when you talked about democratization of data, that is indeed a very valuable insight. And all of us should understand that how shared goals and shared responsibilities go hand in hand. And with that, given your expertise, Mr. Thakur, I would like to come to you regarding a question on misinformation and awareness. I think there has been a rise in social media, and with the rise, there has been also a rise of social media influence on citizens. So, in critical times like these, how do you think we assess the spread of misinformation or the lack of awareness about AQI or air quality management? And how do you think, how pivotal is it for us to have effective public education regarding this domain?
There are a lot of misinformation in this area. The biggest one is that climate change will always happen. It's a natural phenomenon. But for God's sake, it's not a natural phenomenon. Ice Age took place about 10,000 years ago. Around 95% of the scientific literature and climate scientists, and many, my seniors, Ashish Sharma and Mohammad Rafiuddin sir, they'll agree that they say that in the past 200 years, climate change is happening primarily because of humans induced activities, anthropogenic activities, right? Now we have not just accelerated, we have accelerated at the worst, speed. Now this is the biggest misinformation about climate change. About AQI, most of them don't even know what is this. You'll get an argument. It's just a matter of few days, a few weeks, right? You have all kinds of bans on firecrackers. You step out and you will get a lot of sound. I mean, severe plus category draft is imposed, but again, firecrackers are on. So we need to first, and this is happening because of, again, no proper knowledge. So we need to create awareness about deadly effects, how to mitigate. We have to train people at the school level, college, and then institutions, right? Because it's not a short-term goal, as my co-panelists have said. You have to make this a lifestyle. It's not going to be a target to be achieved in the next 5 years or 10 years. It has to be made a lifestyle. All the good work in the climate and sustainability sector have to be highlighted. We have to celebrate, to build and instill confidence in people who are educating, right? There are many influencers, as you mentioned, on Instagram, social media platforms, Twitter, X, Facebook, YouTube, and they are doing pretty good job. But then again, it's if you compare the, for example, like you random example, If you compare a video on climate change effects and a video on any uh, other social factor, religious factor, any other issue, that is not going to get more number of views. Which why? Because it's not interesting to people. The mindset is that it's a matter of just a week and it will be over. We are not even prepared in terms of climate adaptation. I'll give you one example. 2004 Indian tsunami. More women were again vulnerable to climate change more than men across the world died than men. Why? Because they did not know how to swim. Now this is the level that to Tamil Nadu, right? Sea facing area and all that. Do you know that for women are 14 times more likely to die due to climate change disasters than men? They do not have a resource or decision making power, but they are impacted the most. A mother is impacted most by a father. Sorry to put it bluntly. So we have to educate, highlight good work, and it's going to take time. But sooner we start, the better it is, because we are already far behind. I mean, if we do not achieve our carbon emission targets by 40% as mandated by UN, we are doomed by 2030. So I think education plays key part, whether it is company or think tanks or students or people participation, civil participation. But then again, see, it's one thing to say that, okay, climate change is happening, educate them, create awareness that you need to take action. But I don't think that is going to work. You have to make them believe, people, that it is killing you. Only then action is going to be taken. That is the only way forward, as I see. Otherwise, we'll keep having several such discussions and thousands of research papers and all that. Nothing is going to change.
Truly, truly. And also, I think when you said that it is important for us to incorporate this in our lifestyle, I think that would be the most effective way, because unless we don't experience these things directly, we won't be able to understand the impacts or like how vulnerable they are. So, thank you so much for this. And I thank everyone for their insights. And this was an enriching experience. We have explored critical factors affecting air quality. And we know that this topic demands attention. And I think that this panel discussion has successfully decoded the solutions. And I hope that we conduct this discussion again, but not about how to tackle it, but hopefully about how we tackled it. So I think with that, thank you so much for your time and thank you so much for these ideas.